sort of maintaining the current competencies for what a particular segment is as of 2020, that it's probably it might not be the right fit. Keep that in mind. No matter, even if you've got many years' experience, it's what's relevant to businesses today.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a really good point. Yeah. Cool. So that's competency-based assessment. So it really relates to your day-to-day work. It's real-life examples, and it's not about pass or fail. So, you know, as in that previous slide, you can go round and round that process of providing evidence for as long as you want. You know, you might really embrace that process and really learn in that area. It is a great learning opportunity, and it's self-guided. You know, it's a way for you to identify what you may need more experience in. So these are the reasons why BLP is using it. Okay, so that's competency-based assessment, and a key part of that is evidence. So, you know, what do we mean by evidence? So I suppose there's three key things that as assessors we're looking for. So we want to firstly know that it's your evidence, you know, it's authentically yours. It's not your boss's, it's not the team, it's your individual one. Okay, so we've got to have an understanding here that organizational competence is not individual competence in this case. We're looking for what you did, not what you as a team did. Okay. Second thing we're looking for is sufficiency. Now, usually this isn't too much of a problem for us because we ask you typically to provide 2 examples, but that sufficiency of evidence is really to say, you know, can you apply it in different contexts? So, you know, as I say, typically we'll look for 2 different examples. And then validity, you know, have you actually provided some evidence that addresses the competency that we're looking at? Does it relate to it? Are you answering the question, for example? So those are the 3 key things that we're looking for with your examples or your evidence of competence. So anything to add? Anyone got any comments that you want to make at that point?
Hey, Barbara, we've got a question here from one of our attendees, if you'd like to take it.
Great, yeah.
So this one's from Vani Nades. She says, in reference to new competencies introduced, and as an approved advisor and partner, do I have to do the competency assessment again for those new competencies?
Hi, Vani. Hi. Thanks for that. No, so recognise that at the moment, you know, this is a bit of an upgrade. It's a new thing that we've brought on, and previously approved advisors, they didn't do the online assessment. You're very welcome to. What we're asking you to do, though, is complete step 1, which is all the basic info, background info. We ask you to select the competencies that you're already approved for. You don't need to provide those at this stage. We may ask you to do that at some stage in the future, you never know. So your current approvals will carry forward. You don't need to demonstrate competence. But if you want to apply for a new area of competency, then yes, you need to demonstrate that using the tool. So go through the questions. Okay. All right. So I hope that answers the question. Right, so let's have a bit more of a chat about the competency tool. So as we said, it aligns really well to the completely to the competency framework, of course. So you've got my info, you've got the technical competencies, and then you've got the step 3 advisor or generic competencies. So let's just have a look at the first one. In the step 1, you've got my basic info, my qualifications, my experience, and my references. And basically, you work through those. I haven't got a live version of it up here because it's too much screen swapping around. But basically, what we're looking for here is that there's no convictions, that you've got 5 years of professional advising experience. You've got a university degree, and you've got some client endorsements. So those are the key things there. Matt and Jen, did you want to talk? Actually, Matt, I might just ask you firstly if you could just explain some of the navigation parts to this, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, the first thing that you'll see when you sign up to do the competency portfolio is you'll get an email into your inbox. the email will say something like, it'll have the subject line BLP Competency Portfolio, and it'll say something like ready to get started. And then there should be a green Get Started button in the email that you can click, and that opens up this competency portfolio. If you haven't started the competency portfolio, if this is the first time opening it, it'll ask what sections do you want to do. But it doesn't actually matter what you put in that one, because you'll be able to add sections later in step 2. So what you're seeing here, this is the top of the competency portfolio, and it's showing 2 main things. You've got your approval progress, which at the moment for Barbara is 0 out of 5. So that means that basically she hasn't done anything yet, or nothing's been approved yet for her to be approved. And so to get approved, she needs to complete all of step 1. So there's 4 sections in step 1, and at least 1 competency area. So it doesn't matter what area she completes. If she completes that 1, then she'll be approved in that area. If she completes 2, she'll then be approved in both those areas. You don't need to complete both areas at the same time. You might do the first one, become approved in that area, and then later on go and also complete the second one. So some people on this call are already approved advisors, and maybe they want to now become approved in one of the other areas. And so they can then add that area on and become approved in that. The other thing that you see up there is your certification progress. So if you want to become BLP certified, you need to complete all 3 steps of the tool. The first step is the My Info section. The second step is the My Competencies. Again, you only need to complete 1 competency. You can complete more, but you only need to do 1 for the certification. And you need to complete all of step 3. And so as you complete those steps and as they're approved by the assessment team, you'll see those progress bars fill up, and they'll move from red to orange to green once they're all complete.
Cool, thanks. So these bars that you can see across here, that just shows you what you've completed in the process, doesn't it, Matt? It's got nothing about the assessment that's happened or your completion or approval of that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what you can see there is Barbara's completed she's put information to all of those sections in My Basic Info. That doesn't mean that, I mean, with My Basic Info, unless there's something seriously missing, that's going to just get approved. But until it does get approved and is checked by usually Barbara, you'll then see that get ticked. And so on the left, you've got some dots. So just beside My Basic Info to the left, that'll get a tick once the advisor's had a look. Yep, that's all looks fine. And you'll see the same, well, My Competencies is a little bit different, but it's a similar process there as well.
So Matt, in each of these steps or each of these sections, there's the request assessment button, isn't there? Which you have to push for it to trigger an assessor to respond.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So when you open up one of those sections, you'll see all the questions, and at the bottom of the section you'll see this request assessment button, and you've got ready for the assessor to review your answers. And once you click that button, what that does is it alerts the assessment team that you're ready for someone to have a look at it, because you could complete this in your own time, and so we don't know to have a look at your answers and to assess your answers until you let us know that, yep, please have a look at them now, I'm ready to be assessed. And you can add questions. So under each section, so My Basic Info, My Qualifications, under each competency section, there's a question box where you can ask a question, and you can do that while you're completing them or after you've completed them. You could put something in there and ask the assessor a question. And on the flip side, the assessor might also put information back to you about your about what's happening. So maybe if you haven't provided enough evidence, or we want to ask you a question, we can put that back through the messaging, and you'll get a notification that there's a message there, and then you can answer that directly through the through that box.
So just one thing to note, once you've pressed that request assessment button, you can't go in and change that section now, because you've sent it off effectively to an assessor to review. So the only time you can get access to that information that you wrote is when the assessor's reviewed it. Okay, so just be mindful of that. Make sure you click it when you're ready, because you won't get access to it until it's been reviewed.
Yeah, but if you, it doesn't mean that you only get one shot. So, you know, if you send it off to be reviewed, while we're reviewing it, you can't edit that information because it would be too complicated for us to kind of know if you've gone back and edited something and we hadn't looked at it. But once we've had a look at it and maybe we put some questions back to you, then we tick a button on our thing to say that we've completed our review, and that opens it up back for you to edit it again if you need to.
Cool. Now, thanks, Matt. Hey, Jen, did you want to talk about some of these other criteria that we mentioned on the side here?
Sure. Well, can I jump to one that I find most relevant to the ones that I assess? I mean, obviously they're important, but with the references, it's important to make sure that your references are for at least one of them is for an SME client. It's important to not have, I think, friends or family are ineligible, and for that. And you know, I have had people put in references from when they've worked with big corporates, which is impressive, but it doesn't actually demonstrate that it's the competencies specifically for SME clients. So with the references, pick really carefully and try and keep them client based, not necessarily an employer from a long time ago, as sometimes happens. Yeah, so I think, and on the references, was there another thing that we were talking about? It was about not having family. You can't be your husband, wife, mother, father, brother, sister, or the like.
Which sometimes gets a bit tricky, doesn't it, when you're in a small island and you're related to everybody. But I guess cousins is okay.
So it's always good. And it makes, I guess, it makes the process a lot faster to go through if you can just, you know, provide an SME client's a great one. Let them know that they'll be contacted, and check that their email address is up to date. And with the experience, I mean, obviously, you know, people's CVs can be quite a few pages long, and we don't want to have you recreate your CV but if you could, as succinctly as possible, include the experience as it relates to specifically to the competency that you're, the competency or competencies that you're applying for.
Great. And the 5 years, I mean, it should be, we use the word, you should have 5 years experience, because, you know, as I said, you're already an advisor, you know, an experienced advisor. So 5 years is ideal, but if you can demonstrate competence, then, you know, maybe that's okay if you've got a bit less. Similarly, you know, we would expect that you've got a university degree level qualification in your area of expertise. But if you don't, but you've got, you know, wealth of experience instead, then, you know, maybe that's okay. So that's a rule of thumb. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it's a rule of thumb on both of those areas. So any other comments or questions on that step one, my info stage? Okie dokie. All right, so let's move on to the technical competencies then, and we'll get into a little bit of detail here. So, you know, as I was saying before, there's 15 new competencies, technical areas. We've opened up 5 new ones. Now, suggestion here, just start with 1 or 2 that best match the service areas that your firm or you in particular are offering. Okay, that's the golden rule with that. Don't try to do everything all at once. It gets too hard. So stick with your key area of expertise. So let's have a little look firstly at one of the questions in one of the technical areas. So I just want to talk you through how I might look at this as an assessor, and I'm not actually the assessor for accounting and finance, but financial management. But let's just have a look. So firstly, and I'm not sure if you're on a small screen, you might not be able to read all of this, but you've got the question in here. So read the question really carefully. From an assessor point of view, what am I looking for? So provide 2 examples where you have personally completed the client's financial report. So, you know, firstly, I'm looking for 2 examples. Oh, straight away, I see here there's only 1 client example. So there's a point I'm going to have to go back to the candidate on. So where you have personally completed the client's financial reports. So we'll go through the answer in a minute, but has this person personally done it? Well, they've used the word I quite a bit, so it looks like it. They've completed financial reports to analyze the financial situation and identify the financial strengths and weaknesses. So I want to see some reference in there to the organization or the client's financial strengths and weaknesses. And I also want to see, your example should outline the analytical techniques that you used. So now this little sentence here in grey, that's kind of the competency descriptor. So that's what you need to achieve. So if you're competent, you're going to be able to use a range of analytical techniques to identify financial strengths and weaknesses in SMEs accounts. That's really what we're looking for here. So in this example, it's a client example. It's a training school. Actually, just note that they haven't used a name. You don't need to break any confidential information. You don't need to name the client that you're talking about. So I produced the monthly profit and loss, balance sheet and budget variance reports for the client using Xero. Oh, okay. So they've done the client's financial reports. Earlier this year, I led investigations with the finance manager into all major variances, and I discovered that some fixed budget items were wrong and they were wrongly coded, e.g. the payroll wasn't aligned to pay periods, so there were always large variances with salaries budget. Okay, so there's a bit of analysis that's gone on there. I recommended a new forecast be developed for the remainder of the year, and then I assisted the finance manager to develop this. In doing so, we identified where savings could be made. Okay, that's good. The client's key financial strength, great, we've got strength in here now, was the cash flow. They had a regular payment from a funder for a certain number of students. However, a weakness, yep, they've ticked the weakness box, was that they counted all of these payments as income, even though at the end of the year they had to repay the funder for any unearned income. If they had less students, they were funded for. So in other words, they didn't treat it as a liability in their balance sheet. I developed a model in Excel for clients to use to determine how much funding they should put aside as a liability. So there's lots of analytical stuff going on here. That's great to see. And then these analytical techniques were simple comparisons, percentage variance against budget, and investigations, and then modelling student numbers. Nicely summarised what their analytical techniques were. So there's a really good example, but there's only one example. But they've covered off all of these items that we're looking for here. Okay, anybody want to make any comments on that, or any questions about that? Okay, so let's just look at another one then. And Matt, I'll ask you to go over this one if you don't mind.
Yeah, great. So the question for anyone who's not able to see it is, provide 2 client examples where you have personally proposed digital/online solutions, platform, software or other solution that enhance business performance or resolve business issues. Describe the issues that needed resolving, the solution proposed, and the business benefits the solution brought. So there's a couple of kind of key points in this, and really the last sentence kind of sums it up. So we want to know the issues that needed resolving. So it's asking for a bit of context. As the assessor, we haven't been into the business like you have. So we need a bit of context as to why you might be proposing a solution. Then tell us a little bit about what you actually did, what you proposed, and then what benefits did that bring. Now, we'd probably expect that the benefits relate to the issue that needed resolving. So ideally, you've identified an issue, you've put forward a solution, and then you've explained how that solution resolves those issues, and possibly any other benefits that may have come about. So there's 2 examples here. Again, we haven't identified the business. There's no need to identify the business. But one thing that often is helpful is a bit of context as to what the business was. So in this first example, we've said it's a physiotherapy business. Then we've explained what the issue is. So new physiotherapy business needs an online presence and wanted to be able to share a free audio recording with tips on how to stretch and recover effectively. Needed a cost-effective solution with low ongoing costs. So that's given a bit of detail around what issues, the context of the solution, and what issues were needing to be resolved. And importantly, it gives us as the assessor an understanding of what were you weighing up when you were deciding on a solution. So there could have been lots of different options you could have used, and so this is going to help us it's going to help you to explain to us why you've chosen a particular solution. So the solution proposed developed a website using Squarespace, which linked to the audio recording hosted in Google Drive, trained the client how to make changes to Squarespace, to the Squarespace site herself. So we've explained quite clearly what the solution was, reasonably succinctly. We don't necessarily need huge amounts of detail. You don't need to explain, what template in Squarespace you might have used, or sometimes I'll see people, they'll put, full specs of something like that. We don't necessarily need to see that kind of detail, but it's good to see important details that might relate back to the issue again. So then we've got the last part, which is the benefits. So Squarespace was used because it's cost effective to build a visually appealing website and is easy to make changes. So that's linking back to the issue that we had. So we needed a cost-effective solution, we needed an online presence, and so we've explained why we've chosen that particular solution. Google Drive can be used for free, so again, cost-effective. The client could now be found in a Google search, and her ongoing costs of maintaining the website was low, as she could make the changes herself. So you can see that everything that we've put in there relates back to the issue. So I think this would be quite a good example if you did something along those lines, because it addresses all the points in the question, but it also tells a really clear story about what was the issue you were trying to solve, what was the context of what you were doing, what solution did you put forward, and then you've justified why that was a good solution for that client. And so that's one of the things that Barbara mentioned at the very start around maybe an advisor versus salesperson. An advisor would compare the different options that might be available, whereas a salesperson would probably look at an existing product that the company owns and try to explain why that's the best option for them. And so it's a good way to show that actually you've compared all of the options available to that person from a reasonably unbiased point of view, as opposed to trying to sell some sort of company product. The second example there, you can see it's a lot shorter. Being short doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. I'll read it out. It does meet it does kind of address all of the questions, but I'll talk a bit more about it afterwards. So the second one is an aid program. So one thing there immediately is an aid program isn't an SME. So one thing that Barbara talked about in the references was that because BLP works primarily for the benefit of SMEs, it would be good if the examples that you give us are also related to helping SMEs. So we've got an aid program. So issue, wanted to be able to collect data digitally in an environment where internet connectivity was poor. Solution proposed, tablet application that forms can be completed offline and are then uploaded when the tablet connects to the internet. And the benefits, data could now be collected in a consistent and reliable way versus paper-based forms without requiring manual data entry after collection. So actually this example does address every single point in the question, and it does it very succinctly. And it also, like the first one, does tell a story around what was the issue, what was the solution, and why did that solution meet the issue. What you might find though is that there is a bit of a lack of detail, and so you might find that as an assessor, we might ask you a few questions just to get a little bit more detail and help us to be sure that this does in fact meet the competency. Yeah, but I think that's pretty much it. So really, client, the example one is probably good as a kind of gold standard. Client two is probably, probably meets the standard, but is on the bar.
Cool. Oh, that's great. Thank you. And one more example of this, because this is the guts of what's really required. Hey, this is the hard bit. So Jan, I'm going to ask you if you can talk to this one, please.
Yeah, sure. And just to explain to you, so this is a marketing or two marketing strategy examples. And in the new competency framework, the marketing strategy, that very high level strategic marketing based on market research, etc., is separated from the advertising and promotion as more sort of tactical campaign type activities. Some people might have both skills, some people might have one or the other. So the first question for the marketing strategy is to, again, give two examples where you've personally identified the market conditions and target market segments that will drive current and future sales. And this question very much around them to demonstrate the market research competencies. And so the two parts of that are to describe what research was undertaken to identify those, and to explain how you determined which markets and segments should be targeted and why. So the first example here is, and clearly the person, it's that they undertook it, not that the business did, the market research to identify the demand conditions for the current market. So what was going to, for the current market segments and for potential segments. And they show that to do it, they analysed a whole bunch of sources: tourism arrivals data, adventure tourism trends outside of the country, their clients' bookings and the customer profiles to see what the customers were doing, and customer feedback. Then they also did interviews with inbound tour operators and looked at what competitors were offering. So this shows, wow, this person did a lot of market research to inform their decisions. So that's a really good sign. They go on to say that it showed that the best prospects target markets were the school groups, and that there was a driver for untapped potential from higher spend international tourists who were already in country and looking for a special tailored short day trip with a gourmet lunch. So they've demonstrated that they've highlighted, by doing all of this research, the potential to target that new segment and via partnering with tour operators. So this answer is sufficient evidence to show, because it's evident they did so much market research as well. It could be enhanced with a bit more explanation about how they determine which markets and segments, and maybe talk about what wasn't chosen, but it's probably sufficient based on the fact that it shows what it was, the research that it was based on. The second example here, a person was working with a coffee shop who wanted to upgrade, and they worked with them to develop new market research tools. So in the previous example, they were able to use the client's own tools, but they also went to a whole lot of tourism data that existed. This is quite different because they had to create their own customer surveys to identify what people wanted, and then to review competitors and the like. So they obviously have done quite a bit of market research to identify what gaps were in the market, and then to identify what target customers they could appeal to, and specifically what products to offer them. So again, this example shows that describes the market research that was undertaken to identify those target markets, and explains how that market research determined which to target.
Cool, thank you for that. Any comments or questions at that point? Okay, so we've had a little look at a few examples. So hopefully that starts, you're starting to understand how we as assessors look at the answers. And I think the key point here, as Matt said, is that these are pretty short and succinct. It's 1 to 2 paragraphs for each example, or for each answer. Actually, we're not looking for screeds. We're not looking for you to copy and paste in a marketing strategy that you've written. All we need is just a succinct, high-level paraphrasing of what you've done, and that in itself is actually a key advisory skill. Being able to succinctly paraphrase what you did. Wow, that's as a useful advisory skill that you actually use with your clients, and that's actually one of them that's listed down in the generic skills. So there you go, you're practicing it when you're doing the assessment.
And I can't reiterate that enough as well too, about not to cut and paste, you know, the theory of marketing or the theory of business planning sort of approaches, because it's not the example that we're leading. And I know that a lot of people are trying to demonstrate that they've done the theory and learnt the theory, but it's not suitable to cut and paste that into here because it doesn't demonstrate their own experience.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's about applying that knowledge, isn't it? Yeah. Cool. Okay, so the next section then is on the advisory skills. So these are the more generic skills, and this, if you complete step 3, then you are on your way to becoming a certified advisor with and getting BLP certificate in business advisory skills. So so I think you'll find this really helpful in going through it. This section, you'll notice it's kind of split into 3. So there's an understanding and an empathy with SMEs. So understanding, you know, what's actually going on for SMEs, what are their challenges, how do you communicate with them, and what I was saying before about, you know, you need some clear, succinct messages. That's really important, not just for SMEs, but for all businesses. There's a section on advisory process. So, you know, how do you unpick what's going on? What's your diagnostic process that you use? How do you come up with solutions? How do you implement those solutions and provide services around that? And then there's a section on consulting practice. So this is about you and your business. You know, how visible are you? What sort of clients do you get? Have you got a diverse portfolio? What are your practices around confidentiality, conflict of interest? And what do you do to keep learning and keep improving and reflecting on your own practice? So those are the more generic questions. Now, some of these aren't competency-based questions. Some of them are knowledge-based questions, and some are about your practice. But as I say, I think you'll find that really helpful to go through. So that's basically the competency assessment tool. So just have a few very brief tips, and there are many more tips if you go to BLP's website. You probably can't read that link, but if you have a little look around the website, you'll see some support areas for BASPs, and if you follow that, you'll come to some tips on completing the competency assessment. But key things, you know, firstly, you know, as Matt mentioned, you've got a link. Bookmark your link so that you don't lose it. Make sure you put that somewhere where you can go back to readily. Read those competency descriptors that are under each question. That gives you a very high level of what we're looking for, what competent, what good looks like for your answer. Make sure you unpick that question. Check through that you've answered each element of the question. What are the key things the question's looking for? Is my answer answering those key things? Very, very good tip that I thoroughly recommend, especially if your internet's not so good, is prepare your document in Word first. I know, you know, you might lose connection, and then you may lose some of your work. So it's a good idea to prepare it in a Word document first, and then upload it, copy and paste it in. And, you know, again, can't stress enough, keep your answers short and succinct. And I'm sure there's many more tips that we could share with you, but those are probably the key ones. Unless there's anything else, Matt and Jen, that you want to add to those. Okay, so that's a quick guide to the CAT, the competency assessment tool. For those of you that are regular attendees of our webinar, you'll notice that there's usually a little dog with its hand up in the air, but I thought it was more appropriate to have a cat this time, as soon as we've got a competency assessment tool. Anyway, any questions on the competency assessment tool or our framework or anything at all around that?
Thanks, Barbara. Yes, we've got a question here from Thelma. She asks, if someone is new to business advisory but has had many years work experience, what is considered as acceptable qualifications and experience required to qualify?
That's a fantastic question. Thank you for bringing that up, actually. Look, I think this is where it's tricky, hey? So, I mean, I know from my own experience, you know, I've had quite a lengthy, let's say, a lengthy management career and a business leader career, but does that make me a business advisor? No, it doesn't. But in my last 8 to 10 years of being a business advisor, I've learned another set of skills that are on top of that strong foundation that I've had as a business leader or business manager. Look, only you are really going to know that. I think it comes back to, you know, have you got clients? Are you able to complete those examples from with a client? So in some cases, perhaps that client could be an organisation that you've worked for. But I think this is about providing solutions. So yeah, we might have to work through that with you to see whether that is actually business advisory services that you're offering. Sorry, I'm sort of getting a bit off track. Help me, guys. Have I answered your question? I'm not sure.
One part of that question was around qualification. So I wonder if you want to talk on the slide. It talked about university qualification. So maybe you want to explain kind of what we're looking for under that qualification section.
Yeah. So typically we would expect a business advisor to have a tertiary qualification, a degree level qualification in your area of expertise. So if you're a marketing person, then we expect you to have that knowledge and apply that knowledge that you've learned at university around marketing. But if you don't, but you've got a wealth of experience around that, and you've learnt all of the knowledge that you need to be a marketing advisor, then and you can demonstrate that, then that's fine. So as I said before, it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's a rule of thumb that you have a university degree in your area of expertise. Similarly, it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's a rule of thumb that you've had at least 5 years experience of advising SME clients about business issues, rather than, say, managing an organisation or leading an organisation. But that's a rule of thumb. So it comes back down to your individual evidence of your competency with the questions that you're going through.
Yeah, maybe one good thing to add is that it doesn't hurt to start the competency process. So you could always sign up, and you can have a look at the tool itself. You can maybe have a look at the questions in your competency area that you're interested in, and decide for yourself, do I think that I could provide 2 examples for each of these questions that are going to meet the competency framework that we've described? Am I going to be able to answer those questions well? Do I have SME examples? And that's probably a good guide for yourself around, is this the right competency for me to apply for? And it doesn't matter if you can add new competencies. You don't have to complete them. You can just have a look at the questions and decide, do I think this is the right one for me?
I think that's a really good point, Matt. It's actually using this assessment process as a learning experience for yourself. And so what I would expect that process to do is to reveal any gaps for yourself. So, if you're finding it difficult to answer a question, you think, actually, I don't have that experience. I haven't done that. Now it identifies that, well, maybe I need to go and get that experience. How do I go and do that? So maybe that's a way. Now you might say to your boss, if you've got one, right, can you give me some clients? I need this sort of experience, please. Or if you're working on your own, you might hunt down a new area of advisory services that you want to offer, and try and find some clients in that space. So yeah, it's not. I want to be really clear. Our approved advisors are already advisors, are already competent, high quality, experienced professional advisors. They're not learning through the process, but that's not to say that you're not somebody who's got a wealth of experience that do that. And also, let's use this process as a learning experience and gain more skills. And there are other ways as well that BLP supports new advisors, which actually is on the next slide. So BLP does support BASCs and business advisory service providers and the staff within those firms, particularly new advisors, Through our Business Advisor Development Program, we run consulting and leadership skills workshops. We offer a range of consulting services to support individual advisors to develop their skills. And of course, we've got our webinar series, our podcast series. We've got a number of things that we do to help BASPs to gain the advisory skills that they need to do a fantastic job. Any other questions?
I might just, one more thing, Barbara, maybe just to reiterate, because one of the things that I get asked a lot too is with regards to the technical competencies, and what's compulsory to be an approved advisor, and then in terms of technical competencies, and then with the advisor skills and how that is and allows them to receive the certificate as well as the technical competency. Just to reiterate that.
Yeah. So to become approved, you need to do step 1 and step 2 of the tool. So your technical competency, your background info, your experience, quals, etc. To be certified is that extra step that gives you that extra badge, if you like, that extra kudos, and that's the more generic stuff that we want you to demonstrate as well. So there's kind of an assumption that you've got that already, but being able to absolutely demonstrate that to us means you've gone that extra mile. So yeah, that's the generic sort of communication, understanding SMEs, and talking a little bit about your practice. That's how you've developed your consulting business. Is that what you're meaning, Jen?
Yes. Yeah. Thanks. Sorry to make you repeat it, but I found that something I get asked a lot.
Yeah, and as I say, really encourage you to do that step 3. I think it's a great way to just sort of check, hey, am I doing the right sort of things as a consultant? Is this what I should be working on? It's a very useful tool for self-reflection and self-development. Yeah, absolutely. The whole thing is, but especially that area, I think. Cool. Any other questions? Okay, well, I'd just like to say thanks very much, everyone. And no, it's been great to be able to sort of unpick and share a little bit about what we do as a panel of assessors, and just to really explain and reiterate the importance of the competency assessment process to you. We really do want to promote a high quality network of advisors, and the only way that we can be assured of that is to do a quality assurance process on you guys and with you guys, and that is our competency assessment system. And as I say, it really is supportive of all of us. If one person is in there that lets the side down, then that impacts the whole network. So I thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for being part of this with us. It's a great journey that we're going on. Anusha, I'll hand back to you, if that's okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Barbara, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We're going to wrap this webinar up now. If you do have any questions, and we think of something later this afternoon or tomorrow, you're welcome to get in touch with Barbara on barbara.wilkinson@businesslinkpacific.com. That email address is on your screen right now. And she's happy to take any questions or feedback as well. Thanks to Barbara, our presenter, as well as Jen Bartlett and Matt Lloyd, co-presenters today. And thank you all so much for joining us. We'll see you again next week at our regular time of Thursdays at 2 p.m. for our BLP webinar series. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you, everyone.